What's going on, football fans? It's me, J.R. Clark, back again with another Pound for Pound ATL Live. Joined as always by my main man, Jonathan Holder. Jonathan, what's going on, brother?
Man, it is a beautiful Tuesday in the neighborhood. Got mandatory OTAs going on. Guys getting back to practice. Uh, Another day closer to my 3 day weekend coming up.
There it is.
Man, I am doing great.
Heck yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And yeah, pretty good day today, Tuesday. It's nothing nothing too crazy out of the ordinary, so to speak, other than like you said, we got going at the mandatory mini camp, which is today and tomorrow. I always found it like super interesting that mandatory mini camp that everybody freaks out about whether somebody's there or not um ends up being just like it's just 2 days, you know.
Yeah.
It's like I really don't know exactly, other than just physically, from a coaching staff point, physically putting your like eyes on the guys
Mm-hmm.
before they break for summer vacation or whatnot. It's like I'm not sure how much you're going to accomplish in 2 days. Maybe it's a deal where, hey, they're just trying to see, how much retention that they have, or I don't know. Well,
Probably some of that, and then also like things to leave them on a certain note. Like, hey, just remember this stuff, or make sure you're going over this part because when we come back, we're going to really dig
gonna
deep
do
into
this right.
this. Yeah, there's all kinds of potential reasons why, and it probably varies from team to team. So
Yeah. So I guess without much further ado, we'll just continue to get into it. Now, before we get too much into it, Flavius Hobbs was nice enough to drop this comment before the show even got started, and I felt like, you know what, I wanted to read it. It was a nice comment. So he says, "Always a pleasure to hear your thoughts on the team. I think your coaching experience has provided you with more wisdom in your commentary. Also, thank you for your professionalism. That is something that me and Jonathan try to strive for. Is professionalism in, like, no, we're not professionals, obviously. Like, I have a 9 to 5. John has 9 to 5.
yeah,
There, like there's a good chance that I'm all over, Atlanta and the surrounding area on a daily basis. So I mean, you could easily run into me anywhere. So, but that doesn't mean that when we come on live and we hit, go, that there's a certain standard that we want to try to hold to. And I appreciate it when people like see that standard and recognize it, because that tells me that it's coming through.
yeah.
And like when we go to like Mercedes Benz for a practice or a game, or we're up at Flowery Branch for training camp or whatever, we want y'all to feel like y'all can come up and talk to us, because at the end of the day, like I said, we're fans like y'all. We ain't getting paid to do this. Not
Nope.
not in any way that makes it meaningful. I might
Nope.
get enough to buy me a shirt
Yep.
or a
That's
hat.
about it. That's how I got my hoodie. That's how I got. I think that's pretty much it. It's like the hoodie, and that's been it. I hope maybe it'll get us to a game or two this year. We'll
Yeah,
see how
maybe.
that goes.
Right. I mean, the channel is probably partially responsible for all these daggum hats behind me. So, much to my wife's chagrin. No, actually, she encourages me probably more than she should. Um. Anyway, Chris says, "What's going on, Falcon fans? What's going on,
What's going
Chris?
on, Chris?
How's the weather out there in Oregon? I'm always curious how the other side of the country is doing." John Higgins says, "Hey, P for P, what's happening, guys? What's going on, John?
How's it going, John?
Man, we just hear about to chop it up about these Falcons before we get to the true dead season. This will be like the last live information that we have gotten, and sounds like as far as minicamp goes, the only folks that weren't there, outside of Avery Williams, obviously because he tore his ACL, was Kyle Pitts, Eddie Goldman, and Caleb Huntley.
Yep.
Um, and all those guys are reasonable for them not being there.
Yep.
With Pitts coming
Two
back.
guys. Yeah,
Yeah,
two
go ahead.
guys coming back from injury, Pitts and Huntley, and then Goldman. he's doing his own thing. He's like on a different track, trying to get back into football shape from retirement.
Right.
So I expect him probably to like actually start being with the team when they come back from the break. Would be my guess. So
My real one, I wonder if like a guy like Eddie Goldman who's been on hiatus for a while. Uh, I wonder like during this break, like is he instead of like maybe Cancuning it up one last time before this training camp, is he like really pushing it, trying to get back into football shape or what have you?
right, that would be my guess. Is he's maybe not he keeping up with the routines, the daily routines of trying to get back into football shape.
Right. Chris says he's been trying to get back into football shape for 20 years. I am in the shape of a football,
I mean,
round and
that counts,
folded.
right?
But hey, look, anytime anybody always brings it up talking about getting into shape, I am a shape. It just happens to be round, you know. So it's still a shape though, right?
Exactly.
MJ, we appreciate y'all like showing up because
Yeah.
honestly, if you didn't, I'd just call Jonathan on the phone and we would
Yeah,
just complain.
we just call and rant and rave about the Falcons to each other.
That's right. That's right. But because y'all do show up week in and week out, we rant and rave to y'all. Um, but back to minicamp. There was one of the interesting things like from Tori's notes, because obviously we're not getting a lot of like videos out of this, out of the minicamp, at least not yet. The practice was this afternoon. The one thing that I found interesting, and I see you correct me if I'm wrong, same thing with y'all in chat. Um, they did today's practice down at the bins, and I hadn't known them to do any OTAs down at the bins before.
Huh.
So I thought that was an interesting little tidbit because Michael Rosenthien had like a little soundbite from uh, Desmond Ritter asking him had he thrown with Kyle Pitts or what have you, or like was he trying to get scheduled to have like a throwing session before training camp? And I was like, was that from was that from the other Friday? Because they were in the
Yeah.
bins. And then Tori McElhaney said the Falcons began mandatory mini camp on Tuesday afternoon at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. They'll practice again Wednesday in Flowery Branch. So I just found that interesting that they had done an OTA on at the bins. I don't.
I
Do you
wonder
remember
it.
doing that?
Well. So there's some guys like Cordero Patterson. This is so he was there, and this is the first time that he's worked out with the 2023 version of the
Right.
Falcons. So I wonder if this is for guys to, and specifically being at the bins, maybe it's a situation where it's like, okay, we're going to come in, everybody needs, because potentially they have different lockers, like in different positions. So like, hey, let's make sure everybody knows their way around, where their lockers at, get their if there's any stuff they want to put in their locker, like this is time to kind of get that stuff set up. Meet and greet with some people who haven't had a chance to meet and greet yet, like face to
Right.
face potentially. Just kind of bringing everybody together that can be here, um, and just make putting names to faces and all that jazz. Just getting everybody together could
Hmm.
be a good reason why it happens at the bins too. So.
Right. So like we're saying before, we like there's not much like analysis we can give at least as of yet, unless they decide to put out like a little comp video or whatever. But reading like Tori McElhaney's notes or observations from OTAs, one of the things that first jumped out to you, Jonathan, was the first line of the offensive line part two section,
Yep.
which was for those who haven't read it yet, says we don't really need to talk much about the first team offensive line, considering it's a group that feels set in stone.
Yep. Now, whether that's, and the comment I made to you was, I don't know if they mean for this mini camp, for what have you, but that does not include Matthew Bergeron. He's running with the twos right now. Um, and so yeah, it's not a worrying
No,
bit, but it is something that was interesting to read. Um, and then I know you made the comment that, like, we've had, you look at the last couple of years. Uh, Year one of Arthur Smith, they drafted Richie Grant in the second round. He didn't start basically the whole year.
right. Like he
Um,
has some spot starts here and there at the nickel position, basically out of necessity. But last year was his first full year starting.
yep. And the same thing with Troy Anderson. Like, he became the starter later in the year, but he started off as like spot start, spot, not even spot starting, just like spot rotation guy.
Right. Yep. And
Um,
and the same deal with Ebiketie. Like Ebiketie, we looked it up before the now granted he got a good chunk of snaps before he got that forearm injury, but he was at like 537. And for comparison purposes, Miles Garrett, who is a full-time DN, obviously, but Miles Garrett was over 800 snaps.
yep.
So that lets you know that, Miles Garrett wasn't far off from doubling what, Ebiketie put in or logged last year. So, um, yes, this seems to be necessarily like if we draft you in the first round, we're probably expecting a good bid. But so far, the second round and lower, they seem to want to sit there and develop. Now, this also could be, part of that on the defensive side.
Mhm.
Was that a Pease thing? Very well could have been. Very well could have been. It'll be interesting for the defensive guys that we drafted this year. Now that Ryan Nielsen's here, does that change? Are they counting on? Are they going to be counting on Zach Harris or Harrison more this year than maybe we did?
Uh, yeah, I like
I
the
don't think
comments
so.
I've read about what the team's plans are for him. Does it, like, look, if the guy shows out, he'll probably still play more, but he'll probably be. Uh, I would, if I had to take a guess, barring injury, he's probably looking at somewhere around maybe somewhat less of a share of like what Ebiketie got last year.
Hmm.
So somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 snaps would be my guess. Um, and as far as the Pease thing goes, yeah, that's a possibility. The other thing might be that they're holding Bergeron until they really, kind of like they did with Ritter. Like, a lot of people were like, Ritter should have come in a lot sooner, but like Mariota wasn't, like, he didn't replace Mariota because of an injury. Yes, he did get the surgery after he was replaced because he was replaced. But if
Right.
he hadn't gotten replaced, he would have played out the rest of the year,
Right.
barring any further injury, right? And so he wasn't replaced because of an injury. He was replaced because they felt like Ritter was ready.
Right.
Um, I think they feel like they don't want to have another Jalen Mayfield incident.
I
They
think you hit the
want,
nail on the head there.
if you have a guy that's, he played, it wasn't like he played even some left guard in college. He didn't play any. He played what he did play of in the Senior Bowl. He looked good, but to get the intricacies of the NFL offensive scheme down pat as a left guard is probably going to take him some time. So not seeing him be starter day one of mandatory minicamp doesn't necessarily mean that he could still end up being the day one starter for all we know. But if he's not, I'm not like, oh man, that was a wasted pick. Oh, it's bust city and all this other stuff. I'm going to err on the side of they want to wait till they feel he is truly ready to go. And I think once he is, unless Hennessy is straight up balling, I think that there's a good chance that he gets the shot. And if not this year, then it's next year because you mentioned to me Hennessy is a free agent
Right.
after this year. So
And that like the Bergeron pick, because Hennessy played like the offensive line wise was playing pretty good, like especially in the run blocking aspect towards the end of the season. Um, so yeah, it easily could be a deal where, you know, hey, we can afford to let Bergeron sit and learn and get fully acclimated because he is having to switch a position. So there's like, MJ, like it sums it up pretty good here. It says, Hennessy played well left guard last few games. I definitely wouldn't want to rush Matthew Bergeron. We don't need Mayfield build all over again, and that's that could be what they're seeing there.
yep,
The fact that when Mayfield was brought up in the press conference, like it was pretty much because they were asking him about, like somebody was asking Arthur about like the cross training efforts, um, and like he made it clear that Mayfield really wasn't in line for a starting job at all. So
yeah,
the cross training was to make him more versatile in at a piece for depth purposes. So like that lets you know right there that they whether they ever viewed Mayfield as a true long-term starter or not, they definitely realized that that ship has sunk in the sense
yep,
of, so maybe now they're just trying to salvage a third round pick, especially during his rookie contract, because if they can keep him on during his rookie contract, that's a cheap swing tackle option or a cheaper
yep.
swing tackle option. There seems to be an interesting battle brewing for the nickel position. It was a foregone conclusion that when the Falcons signed make.use to a 2-year deal, a lot of people felt like he was just going to be the starting nickel. Um, but by his choice or whatever, he wasn't at the previous voluntary OTAs. Now it's voluntary, so he didn't have to be. But that opened the door really to get a competition brewing with, uh, show favorite D. Alford, Camp Darling from last year,
Mm-hmm.
who, when he was given some chances, made some pretty good plays during the season. That gave him the opportunity to really like impress himself upon the new coaching staff on the defensive side of the ball. And that might make an uphill battle for Mike Hughes to claim that uh nickel spot.
Yeah,
So
yeah. It's you know I don't understand why. I didn't necessarily, I wasn't looking for him, so I didn't notice that he wasn't there at the
mhm,
bends. But a guy in his position who's kind of came into the league as a highly touted guy, but kind of has fallen off. For him to just assume, we can't say that he did,
right,
but for him, but the way the optics of this is, okay, they brought me in. I'm a high draft, highly drafted guy. They're obviously bringing me in as a starter to not show up for the voluntary OTAs, and then potentially lose out to D Alford because D Alford was there and showed out, and it's like now you just don't. You got to figure out some way to get your foot back in the door
right.
to get in there. That could be a big
And it
mistake on
sounds
his
like,
part.
um both of them seemed like they were trying their hands at, like, with with Avery Williams down, there's been a shuffle at the punt return, and it seemed like Mike Hughes threw his name in the ring for that. Same thing with D Alford, which is not surprising, as it is a way that they could further stick on the roster, which is potential spot for a guy like Penny Hart or Josh Ali's, Zay Malone, Killian Harris, these like lower end wide receiver guys. If they can really carve out a role doing that,
Yep.
that can be a definitely way for them to stick, something we had talked about before. But Mike Hughes, like, he has that experience in college. That was
Yep.
something that he did at UCF rather, and if I'm not mistaken, had a couple like returns for touchdowns and things like that. So that might potentially give him a leg up. NJ says, would Mike Hughes be a surprise cut? Could be a possibility with D. Alford / Clark Phillips taking over. I mean, he could be. Like, the intent has been pretty plain, like plainly put, that they want him to be hard to make this 53-man roster.
Yeah.
So, like,
The only thing I would say against it is we gave up draft capital for him. But
for
that's
Hughes,
I think so. Or is he a signing?
no, I think he was a signing.
I thought he
You're
was
thinking
another
of
trade. I know,
Akuda.
I know,
No,
I know Akuda was, but I thought Hughes was. I just may have been thinking that they traded for him as well. If they didn't trade for him, if they signed him,
I
then
know they
yeah,
signed
all bets are
like,
off.
well, they signed him to like a 2-year, $7 million deal, which everybody was kind of like, or it may have been a little bit less than that, but it was a 2-year deal, and the way it was structured was like a 1 year, 2 million, or 1 year, 3 million. So it wasn't necessarily. It's not structured in a way that would make it impossible to cut him. That much is for sure. Um, so let's see. John says, guys, Jalen Mayfield doesn't need to be anywhere near this team. John, we do need a water boy. I mean, he could, like, we need somebody to carry equipment, right?
They always have that kid that runs out and grabs a tee. I mean, we could save some money on the kid and have Mayfield run out there and grab it.
There you go. There you go. Dwayne Brody, appreciate you, brother.
Appreciate you, Dwayne.
It's a $10 tip, which we thank you so much for. He says, what's up, P for P? As a 40-year plus fan in CA, thank you for the real Falcons talk. At least 12 and 5 this year. Hope to see you, y'all, in Arizona in November. It's harvest time, and AS and Arthur Smith, Terry Fontenot, we trust. It is definitely like harvest time is a real good way to put that.
Yep.
That's a real good analogy. We have been sowing and like preparing the fields for the past 2 years. It seems like to take the farming analogy all the way to the end, it's like Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot had bought a plot of land. And when they showed up, it was just overgrown, destroyed, absolutely just unusable.
Yep.
And, Smith and Fontenot got to work making it something, that is usable, clearing it out, uh, you know, tilling the fields, getting it planted. And now, hopefully, this year, we get to reap our first harvest. And
Yeah.
hopefully, it's a good one, you know? So that's a
That
good
is the hope.
analogy. I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're from California, and I can only imagine as a Falcons fan, the heartache of having to watch this team twice a year play the San Francisco 49ers back in the heyday. We were in the NFC West for some reason. I have no
Oh,
idea why.
I saw that graphic the other day. Somebody was talking about, so it was a team that hadn't done something since before the realignment. And
Yeah,
so they showed the old alignment, and like the NFC Central having 5 teams in it. And that was just, man, it was weird. It was such a weird
yeah.
thing.
It was weird. I mean, but it was the same way in baseball. Like the Braves for I don't know how many years were in the NFC or
West.
the NL West,
Yep.
and that's where the best in the West.
Yep.
Like that was the tagline for so many years until realignment, and then there was the Beast of the East.
Yep.
But yeah,
Yep.
it never made sense to me. I was like, why are we in the West division? We're about as east as you can get.
Yeah.
Um,
It's crazy.
but yeah, I just remember getting hammered by the 49ers uh, every single year, watching Joe Montana drop back, make himself a sandwich. grow some potatoes, wait for them to grow, pick
Yeah.
them, cut them, fry them, eat them, and then he's like, "Oh, there's Jerry Rice. Boom,
Throw it.
done." It's just, oh, it was disgusting watching that.
um, Dre says keep all the freaking DBs, the ones that get cut, put them on the practice squad, because that freaking game against the Bengals was hurtful and painful to watch. I think it's why they did what they did, like in the secondary in general. Like you went out and got, uh, Akuda and Flowers and Hughes and D. Alford and like you stacked this with like you raise. We did a show, a couple weeks back, talking about raising the floor, and I feel like depth wise, and even Arthur Smith kind of brought it up today that you know that you're going to be relying on that depth at some point. So like these guys have to be able to prove it.
Yeah,
So uh
it's the I will say that probably, assuming things work out the way we think it's going to work out, the floor for the raising of the floor of talent has probably been the greatest in the secondary.
right,
Putting in Bates, like you said, Flowers, Okuda, those guys. It's just, you know, uh, now if a guy like a Mike Hughes doesn't make the starting squad, then he's a very quality, potentially depth piece that in case you ever need four DBs or some guy goes down with injury or something like that, then that's a guy who
right.
can come in and hopefully not have as big a drop off as we would have had last year. So.
Fred, we appreciate you, brother.
What
Fred is
up,
coming.
Fred?
Fred is coming in with our daily dose of optimism. He says, "We are winning the Super Bowl, and the NFC is poor." How about this, Fred? I've got a couple wagers that I'm gonna put out there with y'all, and if y'all can remember, first I'm gonna start with Tony. He says that Tony's been on this the whole time. He says, as I
Yes,
stated,
yes.
Tyler Vrabel will win the backup right spot over Mayfield. Tony, if they cut Mayfield or somehow he gets moved to the practice squad or whatever, if it is a clear cut that Vrabel won that job over Mayfield, I don't know if you want it, but I have a pound for pound iron on patch that you could put on a backpack or a hat or a t-shirt or something. I will send this to you if that ends up happening. Same deal with you, Fred, in the sense of if the Falcons win the NFC South, and I'm just saying the South, which is very doable. If
Yeah.
they win the South and make it into the playoffs, I will also send you one of these that you could then iron on to whatever it is you would like to iron on. Now, the one caveat is it is June. I am not going to remember this. So I'm just throwing that out there. It is June. These bets are long bets that are going to take a while to get paid off. So if those end up happening, then y'all are going to have to remind me, and I will gladly mail you some pound for pound iron on patches. All right. Anyway. So, all right. So Tony's going to like follow straight. I love Tony. He's going to follow it up with the projected backup O line. He says Green Ridge, Schaefer, Hennessy at center, Javon Green at right guard, and Vrabel at right tackle. Tony is the only man I know that will give me a projected backup lineup. I love it. Absolutely
Yeah.
love it. So in
I,
that, but go ahead.
the only person I disagree with there is I think Hennessy.
Yeah,
At this point, I think Hennessy's probably your day one starter. I
that's
think now by the end of the season, is he a starter? I don't know, but I think day one Hennessy might be your starter.
right.
I could absolutely be wrong, and I would love for Bergeron to play well enough and show out well enough that he wins that spot. But I'm gonna take a flyer on Hennessy being the starter.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me that week one, Hennessy is your starter, unless like you said, unless Bergeron just absolutely flattens everybody. Woon Carter
Boom! What
says,
up,
"Rise
man?
up, pound for pound family. Thank you guys for the work that you guys put in." Well, like I said, we thank y'all for being here. if it wasn't for y'all, we wouldn't do it. Jonathan could just drive over to the house and we'd sit on the back
I mean,
porch.
like literally, the things that we talk about on here are things that me and him have like, like actual conversations me and him have just had. So if we weren't doing it in front of you guys, we'd be doing it in front of his daughter and my wife, and they would
That's
just
it.
end up getting annoyed with us with how much Falcons we talk.
That's it.
So
But I will say this. We make the statement that we would just be doing it anyway. It is far more entertaining even for us to do it
yes,
here with y'all, conversing back and forth. So King says, "Good fellas, what's going
so
on?
King.
Just chatting it up, bro. Chatting it up, and talking about these mandatory mini camps that have kicked off. All right, let's see.
I'll
Quote
say
of
this.
yeah,
I'll say this. I know where you're going with that, but real quickly,
yeah.
I just want to profess my love for Cordero Patterson. The man is nothing if not an optimistic man. Always seems like he's just talking about upbeat things. Because he talked about like being the first time with the team this year in minicamp. They talked about with Bijan Robinson coming in. He talked about watching the film of the I assume the practices, seeing how much fun they're having out there is just awesome. Couldn't wait to get out there today and have fun with those guys. So he's talked to Bijan, watching practice film every day, see the things they're doing. He's going to bring so much to the offense. It's just nothing but positive, just energy that this man brings, and the what that means for this team, especially for younger guys that are in the league, coming into the league, like Bijan and still even Tyler, of having this guy just be welcoming and all the positive energy that on top of Bijan's positive energy is just it's a refreshing thing to see.
Oh yeah. Like I would like Cordell's one of those guys that it wouldn't surprise me one bit that you keep him on just for like the attitude and stuff that he brings. The energy, the professionalism, the charismatic nature. Like you don't necessarily pay a locker room guy, but when you have, the money situation that we have right now, where we're not paying a top wide receiver, we're not having to pay a top, tight end, we're not having to pay a top, quarterback or what have you. You can afford to have a guys like Cordell, like a Calais Campbell, that bring as much to the locker room and the practice field as they do to the actual game itself. Um, so yeah, I was glad to see that he was back. He was one of those guys that they always talk about. Oh, we have a plan for him as far as like wanting him to be fresh for the season. They understand that he's a 32-year-old running back. They get that, and they're not trying to, uh, wear him out while it doesn't count. You have other guys that can do that as long as he is there and engaged. That's really all you need, and that's really all you're wanting from him. I think I said on a show a while back that he could be a surprise cut, even though when I said it, I was like, I don't think that will happen. Uh, I mean, I legitimately don't. Sometimes when people ask questions like that, you give what would be considered a logical answer from a business standpoint, a roster construction standpoint. But then when you turn to the human side of it, the unlogical, in a sense, the more emotional side of it, you realize that a guy like Cordell means so much more to you than the snaps that he gives you in game.
yeah,
Uh, Kind of like a few years more when the Braves won the World Series and
yeah.
Jock Peterson.
Well, it was Jock Peterson, but also the guy that kind of brought a lot of energy to that clubhouse was we had him last year. I don't think we have him this year, but Guillermo Heredia,
Yeah, Heredia with the
the,
slashing of
the swords.
yep.
Um,
Like
that
guys like
that guy,
that, you know,
he was a clubhouse guy.
right? And that's to me at this junction of his career, like he surprised me the whole time he's been in Atlanta. So he could yet once again surprise me this year. But that very much seems like what Cordell Patterson has been is, that clubhouse guy.
Yep.
So the quote of the day, go ahead.
And he's also just like the rest of Falcons Twitter. Like whenever some dude comes open, he's like, "Bring him home,
Yeah,
fam.
that's
Bring
right.
him home."
That's right.
Or
Like
he'll be like, "Hey, call me. We'll talk."
we'll talk. We'll get something worked out. So yeah, it's like he's a guy who's like like King puts it here. He says he's a great dude on and off the field, and you don't have to worry about him getting into any trouble. Nothing but a positive, great guy. Right. He's a guy who has bounced around the league quite a bit, so understands the importance of like just that camaraderie and being around folks. So I'm glad he's here. Uh,
Yep,
and
absolutely.
I'll be just thankful for whatever he can give us this year. Okay, so the quote of the day comes from in McElhaney's article is she said it was difficult to choose because I had two favorites. However, I'm including both because they have to do the same subject. And it says it's from David Onyemata. The first quote is from Smith, who was asked about Onyemata in his press conferences. He was a pain in the butt or a pain in the ass to game plan against. So that's
Yep.
interesting to hear. Smith faced him four times, and while he was in Tennessee, and apparently he was a guy who was always they had to know where he was at. The second quote,
Said he's pretty pleased to no longer have to worry about him.
yeah,
Worry about
so,
having to game plan for him.
right, and he said during his press conference that he was glad that he was on like in the Falcons red and black instead of on the Saints team. I was glad that he like something we'll get here to in just a second, but I'm glad he specifically said and the Saints team. But I'll get into that here in just a second, something I want to talk about. But the second quote comes from Onyemata himself. He was asked about Grady holding on to the reins of the defensive front with so many new faces. Onyemata said simply, "This is still Grady's group." And I think that says a lot about the way vets like Onyemata Campbell and Bud Dupree respect Grady. Now, think about it. I'm not 100% sure where Onyemata was drafted at, but I know Bud Dupree was first round. I think Calais Campbell was first round. Onyemata may have been a little lower. I'm not 100% sure. But Grady is a fifth round guy who has had to fight and claw for everything that he has as far as his professional career. And like for these other guys who, have established careers, who, has either been the anchor or, been the guy or highly touted as far as Bud Dupree is concerned, to come into Atlanta on a revamped defensive line with a new defensive coach. And Onyemata's got, uh, history with Nielsen. So Onyemata was a fourth round draft pick. So he was even a higher draft pick than Grady. So with that being said, all those guys come here and are still looking at Grady as being, the leader of this defensive line, the leader of this group, and really the leader of this defense. Uh, that was absolutely amazing to me. To,
Yeah.
I don't expect to, like, hear me when I say this. I don't expect Onyemata to be like Grady who, you know, like who you don't, no, that's not how these guys go. Sometimes it's like, oh, well, what do you expect them to say? But for him to choose to say this is still Grady's group, I found that to be an interesting, turn of phrase or choice of phrase.
Well, and he's the guy that's been here, right? This is his ninth season. He's been a Falcon his entire career. He's been at plenty of times in his, especially recently, he's been like the guy, like the one guy on the defensive line that you could, if somebody was going to get to the quarterback, he was the guy you expected to do it. there wasn't really anybody else to do it. And he's been through some bad times, been through some lean times. Um, so like you're respecting the man for the work that he's put into his career to this point, the respect that he has amongst his teammates, both new and old. It just speaks volumes to that. Um, and yeah, he's a guy that, if they came to the team, knew Grady, had heard about him, and they come to the team, and he's a guy that doesn't practice what he preaches. Kind of, he doesn't show up at practice and do all the things at practice that he does, and show the attitude that he does. Then I think that kind of quote doesn't happen.
Right.
But when they come in, they see this guy is the face of the franchise on the defensive side, absolutely. And when they come in, they see him working hard, coming out to practice, doing all the things you're supposed to be doing and doing it the right way. That's where that respect comes from. And I think that's exactly what that was. That was just, giving him the respect that he's due because of the actions that he's taken. So
Yeah, no, I completely agree. But like I say, it was still to me, it was still good to to see that quote, especially like this early in the process. I noted, me and you noted down there at the bins, Grady and David were talking quite a bit. Like almost every time you looked up, they had their heads together, and really like discussing. Like I can only imagine, like path tendencies and like on this type of a rush, how quickly do you like to get to this spot or that spot, you know, like talking, like trying to get in sync is what I can truly imagine. Um,
yeah,
Tony, you always coming in clutch. This is 2016 fourth round pick out of Manitoba College. Tony, where is Manitoba? Is that like that
it
sounds
is.
like is that
That's
like a Canadian?
Canadian.
Yeah, I'm about to say it sounds like
Yep.
a Canadian college. So uh one day I'm like, Tony, if you ever like show up at a training camp, one like, man, I need to shake your hand. I just impressive the amount of work that my man puts in. So let's see here. There was something that like during a press conference that Arthur Smith, like the word came up a handful of times. Obviously you've seen it now in the title and the thumbnail and everything else, but it was evolve. And that was something that, Arthur Smith had talked about as far as, the scheme itself, with in regards to, oh, if you went back, like I think the quote was like, if you went back and looked at 2021, we ran the ball very differently than we did in 22. Because he specifically brought up the pistol formation that they put in, the RPOs, and where some people might not key in on that, I key in on it because to me it brings forth the idea that, like, whether you realize or not, they're tailoring their schemes to the players that they have,
Hmm.
which is something that I begged for from our coaches.
Yeah.
Instead of square peg round hole type situation, get a saw and make the daggum hole square
Yep.
instead of trying to force the square peg through that round hole. And that's on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. That's and I talked about this. They were talking about playbook being this big and whatever. It's like my playbook needs to be as thick as it needs to be for the given situation.
Yep.
Whether that's guys are still trying to come to grips with the defense. In that case, you keep it smaller. If everybody on the defense is really like on the same page. They all get it. They all understand the scheme, and they inside and out. Then my playbook goes to that big, because I've got so many more options. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how many pages I have in that playbook if I'm not, curating it and using the parts of that playbook that put the guys that I have in the best position to succeed. If I don't do that, then I'm just going to run into you're going to run into Dan Quinn when he was with the Falcons, which is I'm going to run my same defense. It's not a complex defense, but you still have to. Everybody has to be on the same page. It's even more so important because it isn't that complex. So you're not fooling anybody. So everybody has to be on the same page. And it worked really, really great when he was in Seattle when he had all pros all over the field. And now you go to Dallas, you see he's in Dallas, and he has changed it up some, but at the end of the day, he still has all pro guys all over the field,
Still
and
has
that
ton of
makes it
talent.
work.
Yep.
So, like
I
when he didn't have that kind of talent in Atlanta, he was still trying to run the same stuff, and it was just not working because you didn't have the horses to run it. So,
I am much more impressed with a at times a Belichickian, a Shanahan style coach that can morph and change, or make the you know the scheme is far more like malleable to the to be able to use any player in it,
yeah,
or be able to the morph to what you have on the roster. And so, like you talk about last year with this crappy of a roster as we had, we still won 7 games and produced 2,700 yards rushing. That is crazy to me.
it's a lot of yards.
Right. You know, you had, you know, crap. Wow, I'll pull it up again. But I mean, like, no, you had, like I said, you had over 2,700 yards rushing last year. There were times in the Browns game where you went on a 10-play drive, got a touchdown, and never threw the daggum ball. Like, everybody in that building knew you were going to run it, and guess what? You're able to run it.
Yep.
Like, everybody gets caught up in the, oh, it doesn't look like X, or you don't have this, or you don't have that. I saw a stat earlier today that there were only 2 tight ends last year that had over 25% of their passes being over 20 plus yards down the field. That was Greg Dulcich and Kyle Pitts. I saw another stat was talking about like deep shots or like deeper passes on early downs. Like Atlanta was in the top 5 of that.
Yep.
So it doesn't necessarily look a lot like everybody else's schemes, but it's a scheme that is like ever evolving and ever changing, which is what you want. Nick's not wrong here. He says the talent makes the scheme easier. Yes, of course. But when you can still do it regardless of the talent, then when you do get the talent, it it goes even. Look at Kyle Shanahan in 2016 when he had the talent of Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, uh, the was it
Devontae.
Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman, like Austin Hooper, those guys. When you had the talent, what did they produce? Oh, only the second best in offense that had ever stepped foot on an NFL field,
Mm-hmm.
like points wise. The only thing that was any better was the greatest show on turf, and it wasn't better by much. So yeah, Sanu, forgot about Sanu.
Yeah.
But so now you take that same head coach who was able to get back to the Super Bowl and has had some pretty good deep runs, but he hasn't had the same, like those years. His defense is actually what has been like carrying him through the season. Obviously, injuries and everything else that they've had to deal with out there, but the scheme still works regardless of who you put in the backfield. It's just when you have the talent, it goes through the roof.
Oh yeah. Oh
You
yeah.
know. Sorry, that was a little bit of a tangent there, but
No, no. It's like you're absolutely right. It's just I will be interested to see if we can stay away from the injury bug. Knock on wood. If we can stay away from the injury bug, and the talent, the team as constructed right now, for the most part, makes it to opening day, and seeing, especially the offense, because the offense is where the continuity is, right? We don't, no matter what, we can't really for 100% certainty say what the defense is going to be. But there is the continuity on offense, and at least you have the same thinkers, right? You have still have
Right.
the same brains working to better that offense, so we can kind of have a better idea of what maybe we're going to see there or hope to see there. And but I cannot wait to see this team as well coached as it was last year, but this year with the talent to do something with it. That's what's exciting to me, and I can't wait for opening day. And hopefully we give you know Bryce a warm Atlanta Falcons welcome to the NFL.
Yep. Yep. Now, Michael Rosenstein just posted his notes from the practice. I don't know if we want to get into any of those. Let's see. Hold on. Tony says, yeah, Jaron, yet Shanahan can't run the football on second and third downs late in the Super Bowl. So then we can kick a field goal. Yeah, I know, right? Yes, but like the flip side of that coin is being aggressive is what got you there. So it just who knows. I'm with you though. I'm absolutely with you. I'm trying to see if there's anything that Graham says he felt good, felt surprisingly good. He says I felt strong and confident, good moving around. So that's good to hear from Taquan Graham. Um, here we go. Among the other back at mandatory minicamp, linebacker Michael Walker, who kind of wondering where he fits in, right?
Yeah.
Who did limited work. Was he hurt? Did I miss him being hurt? Somebody had to says
I don't
who did
remember hearing
limited
about it.
work, and Cordell Patterson, who spoke after practice. So okay, they didn't really say anything about what Michael did. Here's one he says Josh Ali, pay attention to the name. He comes up as part of the conversation in the return game. Uh, he said he seemed to be a bit of everywhere offensively Tuesday. The receiver had a nice grab on the sidelines from Desmond and caught a good ball in the end zone in 7-on-7 from Woodside, beating Troy Anderson. It's a wide open receiver room beyond Drake London and likely Mac Hollins. Cordell Hodge, Scotty Miller, and Ali could be someone to watch. All right. So that's the kind of stuff that we want to hear, right? Is Josh Ali. So let's see. Now, the one thing we haven't talked about, somebody else brought it up earlier. So speaking of returners, a long list of returners, Zay Malone and Bijan Robinson. I know there's consternation about Robinson being back there, but don't have it. If he's the best at the position, he could end up being dynamic and a game changer. But it's important to have players get work back there just in case of emergency too. I think that has probably more to do it with it myself.
Yeah.
Because I don't necessarily see you putting Bijan on a punt return.
I mean,
Not unless you just had to, I guess.
look, at the end of the day, he's a guy that I I could see, if he comes out and does really well, I could see him do it. But yeah, I think even if he does really well, he's potentially way too important offensively for you to let him go
Especially
back there.
considering
Though,
from what we've heard already, they're lining up Bijan everywhere. Like I saw one report that said they saw him in the slot quite a bit. So I can't see them expecting him to log that much.
I could see him potentially being in a spot where, kind of like the way Deshaun Jackson was for a while, where he wasn't a guy that did punt returns a lot, but he was like, we need a big play, like
Right.
we need something, and so he was the guy that you brought in for like that spark, or like against the Giants, you come in, punt it to him, and then he takes it back for a touchdown to win you the game. So
Right. He's echoing that D. Alford seems to be the early leader at nickel. Once again, getting first team reps ahead of Hughes. Although this could be a camp long competition too. This comes off the heels of him saying that Jalen Hawkins was working with the number two group, but also was getting some run in some packages with the ones. I think when they go big nickel, I think you're going to see Jalen Hawkins on the field. Uh,
yep.
in my opinion, unless of course Trey Flowers comes in and takes that particular role. Um, but I think that says your starting safeties were obviously Jesse Bates and Richie Grant. Those are the two that this regime has put their capital into, money wise and draft capital. So there's no surprising there. Let's see. Trying to see if there's anything else interesting. Nah, pretty much about it there. About what we expected. So
Yeah,
let's
that's
see.
yeah. The Josh Ali, his name keeps popping up. So
Yeah,
they,
that's going to be
they
something
got
to
to
keep
keep
an eye on.
an eye on.
Yeah, it's going to be that return that return spot is going to be somebody's avenue to stick on this team. Whether it's Alford being able to do that and the starting nickel, whether it's somebody like an undrafted guy like a Malone or an Ali that's how they make their way on this team. That is going to be somebody's way of sticking on this team. All right, well, we got a few minutes left. If anybody's got any questions that they have are waiting or holding to get answered as we move
Hey,
into now. Next week I will be out of town, so there's a possibility that there may not be a live show on Tuesday, but we'll see how all that shakes out. I will be on the backside of a campsite on West Point Lake, so I don't know what the signal is going to be like out there. So
yeah, we'll see how that goes. If it'd be Jr. with a spotty connection, I might see if I can have somebody come on to sit with me if necessary. You know, nobody. The person I have in mind is not necessarily an analyst or anything like that. Just I think it'd be cool to have him on to chat. But if that happens, so we'll see how it goes. Um,
right. So okay. Dre says, "Yes, sir. That freaking news I like and love to hear about my boy, my dog, my man, Jalen, the ball hawking Hawkins. Uh, yeah, that would be. I mean, I think that big nickel is probably going to be his way going forward. Um, he's been a decent guy to have, but he hasn't necessarily been able to carve out a solid role. He was given that chance last year and didn't necessarily stand out. Not enough for them not to go get Jesse Bates, you know. Uh, so because they could have used that money to grab a edge rusher or something of that nature, or who knows what else, but they chose to go get the arguably the best free safety out on the market. So
yep.
um, the Hawkins is going to have to find a way to stick, and that big nickel could definitely be it.
I mean, if he can come in and be like a thumper, a guy that can get those like intermediate stuff, really like tag some guys there, jar the ball loose a few times, uh, you know, cover some maybe not some of the better high end tight ends, but be a guy you can put on some league average tight ends, the average everyday tight end, and he can hold his own there. That's where he's going to have to be. Um, that and probably special teams too. He'll
Oh yeah.
probably have to make sure he's doing his diligence on special teams. Uh, but yeah, he's. I want to see good things out of him because I think he's done some good things while he's here, but then he's other times he just looks like he's just not paying attention to anything.
it
So
can be it can be tough at times for sure.
yep.
Let's see. Emmanuel says y'all really sleeping on Jalen. He is honestly a better cover safety than Richie. I think. Oh well. You finish reading that. I'm gonna pull something up.
So yeah, he said better coverage safety than Richie Grant, and that's obvious. Richie got burnt so much last year while Jalen made play after play. Film
All right. Let's
tells.
see. All right.
Uh, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say you're 100% wrong, Emmanuel, um, because you know, like right off the top of my head, I'm not going to sit here and say, I know one way or the other for sure. What
No.
I will say is, it felt to me that Jalen Hawkins in run stopping was pretty good, but when it came to the pass game, it just felt like that he was lacking in that area. Now, Jr. may about be to say something that's going to completely disprove my theory,
No. No.
but
No.
we'll see.
Okay. So this is according to PFF, and King's right. I think we'd already talked about this, but I'll do it again. It's fine. Um, but according to PFF, Richie Grant's coverage grade by their metrics, and I always try to preface that because I'm not saying that they're the end all be all, but by their metrics, Richie Grant had a coverage grade of 69. And let's see here. I looked at the wrong thing when I looked at Jalen Hawkins. And
Nice.
so Jalen Hawkins' coverage grade was a 56.1. So by their metrics, Richie Grant was a better coverage safety than Jalen Hawkins.
Yep.
So I hear you
What
on,
about what about run stuffing? Does it say that?
let's see, run defense, RRDF. So Jalen was 64.9. So let's go back to Richie. Maybe he had him in the run category. What did I say? 64.9. Okay. Run defense. Okay. 57.1 on Richie Grant.
Yeah.
So Jalen, and I've said for a while that I felt like Jalen was better at the closer to the line of scrimmage. Myself.
Yeah.
Uh, no, okay. I hear you. I get it. Like I said, that's why I preface it by for right now, my quick answer of what I can pull while I'm sitting here. I get you with the whole go watch film. Believe you me. I watch quite a bit of film. And what I will say in that aspect, without knowing what their assignments are in the coverages, in the scheme, as the more I learn, the more I am hesitant to say this person does this better than that. Because in the scheme that we played, the safety's jobs, depending on what coverage was called, could be vastly different. So it's just hard for me to say, one was playing supremely better than others.
Yeah, and I'll say this: I agree with Nick. Like, I really don't care who starts at safety, whether it's Hawkins or Grant. Bates is definitely starting. So,
Oh yeah.
whoever is starting alongside Bates, I don't care if it's Hawkins. I don't care if it's Grant. I don't care if it's Helms. I don't care if it's Trey Flowers. I really don't. Whoever they start at safety opposite Jesse Bates, just play the position.
That's
Like,
it.
do a good job playing the position. And if you do that, I'm really not going to care one way or the other what your PFF stats look like. I like when like I was just giving my personal opinion just from because I watch every single game,
Yep.
sometimes more than once. depending on like how bad or how good it was. I did a lot. I watched most games at least one time on top of the initial view. But and just from my eyes and my impressions watching the games, like I come away thinking exactly the same as PFF, which
Right.
is in coverage, Grant has the upper hand when it comes to thumping and run defense. Hawkins is a bit better on that.
All right, let's see. Okay.
Game.
So Emmanuel says, like, Richie got burnt. Okay, let's see. Just I ain't gonna hark on this too much longer. I'm waiting to see if somebody else, gives up another question or whatnot. But Grant had five pass breakups, two interceptions, um, and gave up three touchdowns with yards after the catch on against him less than 200. So let's see. How about I just copy this, duplicate this, so I ain't got to keep. So I can keep it up. Jalen. Glad I put this RAM on computer. My computer don't slug nearly as much doing this nowadays. All right.
Nice.
Hawkins had four pass breakups, so it's one less. Same amount of interceptions. Gave up less touchdowns, so there's a point for Emmanuel. He only gave up one touchdown. Then yards after catch. This also can, but it can be indicative of where he was playing if he's playing closer to the line of scrimmage. But gave up less yards, 88. So, Grant had more pass breakups, same amount of interceptions. So, I don't know. All I'm saying is that from what I saw, Grant looked more natural covering the back end, or looked better on that aspect. Both of the guys played better up closer to the line of scrimmage. That's a problem because you need somebody who can play deep coverage. Obviously, that's going to be, um, you know, Bates. So yeah, either way, I think the safety room got better with the presence of Bates. Obviously, let's see. Nope, this one. Then we'll go to that one. He says, "Hey y'all, do you think Bijan is going to win Rookie of the Year? Because I think he's going to run away with it. If he gets the,
Pun.
I love him. If he gets the usage that we think it could be, and he stays healthy, because like Kenneth Walker was like really on his way of winning it, and I don't think there's any like wide receiver that's like rookie wide receiver that's gonna necessarily dominate this year. So he's got the absolute best opportunity if he gets the usage that we think he's going to get. So I
Yeah.
would say yes.
I
Jonathan,
mean, it's a you know this far out from the season, never know. But the vibe I get from when I saw him live, when I see him in interviews, when I see the coaches talk about him, and I see other people like looking at this team and what Bijan can be, I think there's a very, very, very good shot that he, if not winning it, is like way up there in the running for it.
yep,
Like maybe there's a defensive guy that comes up, Jalen Carter. For all we know, Jalen Carter could come out and be defensive. Well, I guess they have offensive and defensive, but there's not just a straight rookie of the year. But on offense, I really don't see anybody that could really, unless somebody's really surprising, I just don't see anybody that really pushes Bijan for that. Maybe,
not
maybe Jameer Gibbs.
maybe Gibbs, but I definitely think Bijan could easily run away with it.
Yeah.
He says, "Hey boys, any prediction on who's the starting linebackers will be? I believe Anderson will be the number one, and surprise drum roll, D'Angelo Malone. Huh?
You're 50% right.
Yeah, you got to have that
I,
right.
I think because D'Angelo Malone, I think is going to be. I think he will play some linebacker. I don't
Yeah.
think he's a starting linebacker. I think it's Caden Ellis, Troy
Yep.
Anderson. Those are
I
the
think it's
two
Caden
guys.
Ellis. You paid Caden Ellis starter money, $3,021,000,
Unless he just falls
21 million.
apart in
Yeah,
training camp.
right. I think it's going to be Troy Anderson and Caden Ellis. and I think you might be right on the you know first like first linebacker off the bench might be D'Angelo Malone. Like he could be battling with Michael Walker or what have you, but um, I definitely think the starters are going to be uh, Anderson and Ellis. Let's see here. All right. Let's see. Question: in what week should we be starting to see us playing our best ball of the season? For me, that tends to like I don't start to panic or worry or what have you, or even get too excited until about week 4 or 5. Like week 4 or 5 is to me when you truly start seeing what this team is going to be all season.
Yeah.
Because at that point in time, everybody's got their kinks worked out. You should be gelled as far as O line, D line. Um, like you really should be fully into whatever your scheme is going to be for that season. Uh, so week 4 or 5, we'll have a real long discussion about what what this team is looking like.
Yeah, I will say though, I think where I want to see us starting to play the best ball of the season. I agree with Jay in that 4 or 5 is about where we start to kind of really get a good idea of what this team's going to be. But I think just like we saw in the 2016 season when we made it to the Super Bowl, you didn't see the best of that team until what week 8, 9, 10,
Something
somewhere in
like that,
that range,
where we really started like putting people
rolling.
to putting people to sleep, so to speak.
Yeah.
Um,
So so
in
for
games.
yeah, so for me, I want to see our best ball like get through like the first 8 to 10 games, either a game or two above 500, at minimum 500 through the first 10 games. Like get at minimum, okay. But I want to see like around week 10, week 11. That's when I want to see like everything starting to click. Like
Right.
Ritter so far has been a guy, and this has played out in his college ball as well. But maybe he can get past this. But Ritter's been a late starting guy. Like
Yeah.
a game when the game starts out, he things are not quite there, and then but he's a guy that puts everything together as the game goes. Let alone the season, the game, and as the game goes along, he gets better and better. We
Yep.
saw that in just about every game he played in, minus maybe the Saints game,
Right.
his very first game. But from game 2 through 4, he got better each game, and within each game, he started out a little slow and then picked it up as the game went along.
Yep.
My hope would be by around week 10, 11, Ritter's a guy who gets started quicker, gets in
Mm,
that rhythm quicker.
much faster.
Maybe by that time, Arthur Smith will have figured out the best way to get him in that rhythm quicker.
That's the hope, right?
Because it could be different for different quarterbacks. Like Matt Ryan, maybe it was like get him some deep shot, like I say deep, like 10, 15-yard passes that are as easy to complete as you can make them, get him going in that realm. And then once you do, then you're getting him into that rhythm. And once Matt Ryan got into that rhythm in 2016, it was lights out. It
Yep.
was we're done for. And so that's the hope that I want to see is around 10, 11 is where I think we should be playing our best ball this season.
MJ says Trey Flowers lock roster spot, primarily third
Oh,
downs covering and tight ends. He played that role very well for the Bengals. He did, but he ain't no guarantee right now. Like
nope.
he's gonna be, battling with Jalen Hawkins for that, third safety role.
The only
Um,
guys I'm going to say 100%, 100% safe for this coming season as far as cornerbacks go. I don't think there's even if they stink it up, I don't think we're seeing any of these guys get cut. And the only guys I'm going to say that about are AJ Terrell, Jeff Jeff Okuda,
yeah, yep,
Clark Phillips.
yeah.
That's it. Now, do I honestly think that a lock is going to be Terrell, obviously Okuda, Clark Phillips, D. Alford, maybe make.use. Okay, those are kind of your 4 to 5 locks, I would say. If I'm a betting man right now, and Trey Flowers is going to be battling it out with some guys for that sixth spot if we're keeping six.
Emmanuel says, "Do you see us beating either the Lions or the Jags?" That's right around the week 4 or 5 you're mentioning, Jr. I'll tell you this, man: the Lions and the Jags aren't the pushovers that they were a few years back. I mean, the Jags have a respectable head coach in Doug Peterson, who's won a Super Bowl with Nick Foles. And he had Trevor Lawrence looking good towards the middle part of that season last year, and you also got to remember they're adding Calvin Ridley, which we know what he can do.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have to like in one of those sections right now. At least it seems like I have to might eat crow with my initial thoughts on the Detroit Lions because when they hired Dan Campbell, I laughed. I was like, dude, you're hiring this lunkhead, you know? And he is definitely like proving me wrong in that aspect as far as being a guy who can actually build and motivate a team to play. So it's going to be interesting to see uh, how those games go, because those aren't as what I would have called, locks like I would have a few years back. So your guess is as good as mine. I hope so. I think we can beat them. Um,
Yeah.
but the Lions got talent all over the place. Jahmyr Gibbs, as we had talked about previously mentioned, they got Aiden Hutchinson, who was on a tear last year. So I don't know, dog. It's gonna
Like
be interesting.
the Lions are weird in that the recent history has been either they completely stink or they kind of do what they did last year, which is they end the season on a somewhat upbeat note. They almost make the playoffs, and then either and I can absolutely see this happening in the past. What's happened is they come back next year, expectations get higher, and
I mean, they're
then they fall flat on their face.
right.
Do I think that's
They're
going to happen this year?
everybody's darling right now. Like just like the few years back, the Browns were everybody's darling. They're everybody's darling right now. So I mean, even CDX for Life says they got the Lions as a team to win a Super Bowl. I mean, there's some pretty high expectations for them. So it's just going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Um, Tony says they still have some defensive problems. They do. They remade that secondary. Two of the guys that we have on our team was a part of the reason why they remade that secondary in Jeff Okuda and Mike Hughes. So I don't know,
Yep.
but all
Now,
right.
as far as the Jags go, again, if they build on what they did last year, that's going to be a really good team this year.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. They were a playoff team last year. Jonathan, how you let me go through this whole show and didn't tell me that the banner wasn't going across the bottom?
The
Like we
banner's not
didn't.
going across the bottom, Jay.
Hold on. There. Uh, here at the 1 hour 20-minute mark. Welcome to Pound for Pound Live. We would appreciate it if you liked, shared, subscribed, and joined the conversation in the comments.
Yep.
Now back to your regularly scheduled follow us on Twitter banner. Let's
Let's
see.
see.
Is there anything else? I don't really see anybody else asking any other questions. King's talking about, Bijan and Gibbs will be the top backs in the NFL in the next few years. These guys' vision and speed is insane. Almost the same type of player, to be honest. Bijan is slightly better, but it's close. It is very close. Like,
I mean, I went back and forth. I was like,
yeah,
Jameer Gibbs, that dude's a dog.
like
Uh, yeah.
my bigger thing was like at Alabama, you just didn't see him run through the tackles as much as he did. So when he stepped up in competition, he got used more of as a dump off pass catcher. He was their leading receiver, you know. last year. So, but what you didn't see him do was line up and consistently run through the SEC defensive line. So who knows, right?
Yep.
Uh,
Oh, so if you want to look at it that way, like Jameer Gibbs ran behind essentially as close as you could probably get outside of maybe Georgia, like an NFL line.
right.
Like that's what he ran behind last year. Whereas Bijan ran behind probably, at least from everything I've read, like one of the worst
Yeah, it was
offensive
not a very
lines
good.
last year.
It was not a very
Uh,
good line, and he was still able to be productive.
yeah, so you get him in Atlanta where the assumption is that we build on last year and have at least as productive, if not a more efficient run game than we had last year. Maybe not running it quite as often, but when we do, we're tearing off bigger chunks on a per run basis. Um, you know the the sky's the limit.
Right.
If he's able to do it with that trash offensive line in Texas, what does he do with a good, decent to really good NFL line?
Right.
So
Well, cool, man. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for us today on a day that there wasn't. Well, there's a little bit to talk about. We were actually able to make a show out of it. Like I said, keep your eye on the channel as we'll have something out on for the weekend, but we might take a break on next Tuesday, depending. It's going to be more on Jonathan than it is me, but we'll figure all that out. If not, we may just like come back and do a live next Friday kind of thing. Who knows? But we'll see how that goes. As always, Falcons fans, y'all can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Grimm1128, GRIMM1128. Jonathan,
at Jonathan M. Holder, come by, say hi.
that's right. Appreciate you folks, and keep your eye on the channel. And as always, Falcons fans, rise up.
Rise up.